Hello everybody, I'm just a dude and this is What's Up. In this series, I'll take the time to look through the comment section and answer any questions you guys might have for me. Whether it's silly, serious, or seriously silly. If you'd like me to answer one of your questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. With that said, the comment I pulled for today was created by Notorious Bag, a longtime friend of the channel. Thank you for participating, thanks for leaving your comment, and thanks for sticking around. Let's see what you have to say. If you got any, I'd like to hear more interesting facts like the Gameboy cartridge. I knew about Gameboy primarily through Mega Man Battle Network, but never got a chance to play it, so I wasn't aware of that detail. Now, just for some context, in the previous episode, I talked about Gameboy and how it was able to push its hardware limitations to create a really fun, enjoyable gaming experience. That hardware limitation, the fact that it has a solar sensor on it, that's not something you see every day. So what Notorious Bag is wanting to see here, and what I'm going to be talking about today, is handheld cartridges, specifically Nintendo Game Boy handheld cartridges that are a little out of the norm. I wanted to keep it to Nintendo and to Game Boy cartridges because that is a lot simpler than just trying to cover a general broad, like, weird cartridges. If you guys want to hear more about that, let me know. But for now, let me just recap on what the Gameboy series is and what all they did. Right, so there are 3 games in the series, all of which have a light sensor in them. And this sensor does various things, but is most notable for charging your in-game weapon. Right, so you have a gun, and when you run out of ammo, you can go to like a power station and charge it back up. And that mechanic revolves entirely around the fact that it captures how much light is actually coming into the cartridge itself, whether it be from the sun or some other light source around the room. Another feature that I actually failed to mention last time is that it had a real-time clock. So if you were playing the game during nighttime, it would be nighttime in the game, which is pretty cool, and only something you see in a couple other games, like the Pokemon series is most notable for doing this. But with Gameboy out of the way, let's move on to some more obscure ones, like, well, maybe it's not as obscure as I thought, the Game Boy camera. This one is actually very well known, and, well, the main thing you do with the Game Boy camera is take pictures. One thing that I didn't know, though, when researching for this video, is that the Game Boy camera is actually compatible with a couple of different things from its time, like the Game Boy printer, the GameCube, an N64 cartridge pack, which you can then transfer onto a floppy disk, which, that's pretty crazy. I would not have thought to even check that if I owned a Game Boy camera, but I guess if you wanted to save your pictures, you could do that. And that's pretty interesting. Now, as to why Nintendo decided to go this direction with the Game Boy camera, I'm not too sure. The best I can really say is that it was a gimmick, or maybe they were just trying to test the capabilities of the Game Boy, or maybe even flex the capabilities of the Game Boy. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. Moving on to something else though, something a little bit more interesting and perhaps more pivotal in the gaming scene, is Kirby Tilt and Tumble. Now, this game is different from others in the sense that it actually uses accelerometers to control the game. Basically gyro controls, like very primitive gyro controls. Now, Kirby Tilt and Tumble was released for the Game Boy Color, right? So not only was it colorful, but it used wacky controls. Kirby is just the experimental child, and this game goes to show that very fact. The gameplay is Kirby, he is a ball, you roll around the play area, And to roll around, you have to physically tilt the Game Boy in the direction that you want to roll. And then if you wanted to have Kirby jump, all you would have to do is shake the Game Boy, or what they call popping, pop controls. You pop the Game Boy and it will make Kirby jump. Why it has gyro controls and why they even thought to do that is beyond me. But some theories that I have are that they were used for Wii testing. Now the Game Boy Color is way before the Wii, but this is definitely giving thought or the idea for implementing motion into gaming. Whether or not this was specifically for the Wii is yet to have been revealed by Nintendo themselves, but it's very clear that this technology at its time was used to practice this gyro mechanism that they were working with. And we didn't see another gyro game until that release of Wario Ware Twisted. Wario Ware Twisted was a Game Boy Advance game that uses a more advanced gyroscope that actually is able to detect the angular movement and the rotation of the device. So not only could you use like pop controls and twist or turn / tilt the Game Boy Advance, you could also turn it. Yeah, you could also turn it. Whoa, revolutionary. WarioWare Twisted is the second WarioWare game, and I think with this one, they also wanted to test the capabilities of gyro controls, perhaps also for the Wii, but they also wanted to try and differentiate Wario from Mario. How do you do that? You make it weird and wacky with these micro games. Everyone knows the micro games in WarioWare, and it's made even stranger by these weird gyro controls on the Game Boy Advance. And actually, the heart and soul of WarioWare games actually stems from a lot of the motion controls. I can't think of a single WarioWare game that does not at the very least use some of the gyroscope or some of the motion controls in the device itself, whatever that may be, which is actually very interesting to me, especially when you're thinking about it in hindsight, the impact that this little Game Boy Advance game with a very primitive gyroscope, still very accurate, mind you, very primitive but very accurate gyroscope impacted on Wario and his games in general. Yoshi, on the other hand, Yoshi's Universal Gravitation, released also on the Game Boy, did not see as much success. Yoshi in general doesn't see a whole lot of success in their games. I mean, there was Yoshi's Island, then there was a couple Yoshi's Island remakes, or sequels, whatever. And while those are fun games and they see play, they're definitely not as universally applauded or universally known as the WarioWare games or even Kirby. Kirby being the experimental child, they'll just toss ideas at Kirby and see if it sticks. Wario being wacky and goofy and having implemented these gyros into its core mechanics of even future games, where Yoshi did not fare too well. Yoshi isn't really the weird child, it's just like the weird cousin, if that makes sense. There was like a Tetris game for it, there was like other puzzle games. Yoshi's a weird Nintendo IP that I don't know why they attempt to try and test things with, whatever. Getting back on topic, Yoshi's Universal Gravitation also uses a gyroscope. The same one, if not a very similar one, to that which was used in WarioWare Twisted. And the point of this game was Yoshi was maneuvering around the world, and you could flip the screen and the enemies would roll around or cause various rocks to move or unlock certain areas, what have you. Now, when this first released, it was not received very well. Just kind of like a mediocre game, which I really can't blame them. I've seen gameplay of this game. I haven't played it myself, but it does not look fun in the sense that other Yoshi titles are fun. But bringing this back around, the idea that these gyro Game Boy Advance games and even the Game Boy Color game are working towards something larger than itself, working towards this Wii console that we didn't know was the Wii or what it was going to be, at least at that time, is very fascinating to me. And it just goes to show all of the testing and the hard work that they put not only behind the scenes, but in practice, and the certain successes and failures of what Nintendo was trying to go for. Moving away from gyro controls for a moment, our last game that I want to talk about is actually one that's very obscure and one that I have actually been trying to find for my own personal collection at a cheaper price. Robopon is a game very similar to Pokemon, but instead of pocket monsters, you have robots. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what's weird about this game cartridge? Whoa. Well, let me tell you. Firstly, it has a real-time clock, not too dissimilar from the Pokemon games, but it also has an infrared panel. Now, you might be thinking, what? Infrared panel? What even? Why? What does it do? Right, so the infrared panel was used for various things. The idea or the battle mechanics of the game allowed you to, while fighting a robot, point your infrared TV remote or other infrared devices at the cartridge. And if you pressed a button or if you activated your, well, let's just say your infrared TV remote, it would actually boost the robot in game, which is, that is so cool. Being able to interact with the world around you and also have that interact with the game that you're playing is mind-boggling. If you think about it, we're only just now in modern times being able to do something even slightly similar to this with like VR and AR technologies. Robopon was ahead of its time, and I didn't even mention before that this game actually came out on the Game Boy Color. Oh my god, this is a Game Boy Color game. Game Boy Color. Imagine that. That is insane. Oh my god. Now, obviously nobody's carrying around infrared items anymore, and there's a lot of content locked behind, unfortunately, this feature alone, but there are communities trying to salvage the Robopons or the Robos. I don't know what they're called, unfortunately. Sorry guys, you'll have to correct me in the comments. But there is a community that is looking to salvage this game as best they can, through emulation, through save files, what have you. Oh, this was a game that had DLC. Now, how it worked, it's a little sketchy. There's not a whole lot of documentation online as to how this worked, but what we do know is that there was extra space left on the cartridge itself. So if someone wanted to update their cartridge with, say, more Robopon or more robots, as long as they had access to whatever is giving out that information, they also had access to DLC content. That's amazing to me. Now, I know I didn't explain it very well, but that's kind of all the information that I was able to find, and that's kind of the best way that I know how to put it into words. I believe it used the infrared panel system as well to maybe activate or share that information. Not too sure, but yeah, that's Robopon is nuts. All of these games were nuts for what they were doing, what they were trying to do, and what they eventually accomplished. But yeah, I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you guys have any questions, comments, anything, please let me know. I will be sure to, next episode, compile a list of things to maybe talk about or discuss. With that said, thank you everybody for watching, and till next time, bye.